Well, the veterans know there is nothing easy about basic training. Whether you're a veteran and been through it yourself, or whether you haven't, you know it too. Basic training, it's demanding physically, of course, but perhaps even more so, it is also demanding psychologically. And it has to be, because the purpose of basic training is nothing less than total transformation of a person. The aim is to shed the recruit's old self, their old way of doing things, that a new life, a new self can be created. One in which they think differently, one in which they act and relate to others around them differently, one in which they believe the welfare of those they are with is not a luxury to indulge in once their own personal needs have been met, but it is in fact a critical necessity. For in the hardships to come, they will need one another. They will need to lean on one another, because only together will the individual's safety and welfare be secure. All of this has me wondering on this Veterans Day, as I'm sure you're wondering too, what kind of drill sergeant would Jesus be? Did you come here asking that question? I wonder what kind of drill sergeant Jesus would be. For his aims and his goals seem strikingly similar to the goals that I just mentioned. Therefore, as divine drill sergeant in charge of spiritual basic training of us and his 12 new very raw disciple recruits, how does Jesus go about achieving in them and in us a total transformation of self, in thought, in word, and in deed? Now, before I answer that question, I want to share with you a recent scientific discovery, which is this. Before you can walk, you have to learn how to crawl. Now, maybe you're thinking, that's not a scientific breakthrough or discovery. That's just an old adage about not getting ahead of yourself. Well, it's both. It's both. Crawling, pediatric physical therapists and neurologists have discovered, changes us. Crawling rewires our brain. The crawling motion, see if I can do this, when you reach out your left hand and bring up your right knee, and then vice versa, like this crawling motion requires what is called bilateral motion, something new to an infant. It requires the development and the coordination of the corpus callosum, which is a bundle of nerve fibers that connects the right brain and the left brain so that they can work together. Crawling makes that happen. It develops that part of the brain. That part is also critical, they say, for vision. Crawling changes the brain by developing the part of the brain responsible for integrating the right and the left hemispheres. It helps integrate imagination and creativity, which is on one side of the brain, with logic, which is on the other. Empathy on prayer, which is on one side of the brain, with a plan of action to alleviate suffering. Crawling changes the infant brain on a cellular level and it allows the child to begin to think differently. It alters what they can do, how they relate to the outside world. No wonder then that Jesus, as divine drill sergeant, instructs the disciples in our scripture this morning to engage in a spiritual crawl-like practice. Get down on your knees, he said. Reach out your hands. Extend them before you. That you can put compassion into action, exercise humility, begin to define self as service by washing another's feet. It is how disciples learn to walk. They must crawl on their knees and reach out their hands in service. That is how we begin to move forward on the path of faith. But like many new recruits, Peter resists. Because Peter, as a new recruit, he is still filled with ego. He is still embroiled in the argument over which disciple is the greatest. He still believes that leaders should be served rather than serve. And so he rebukes Jesus. He says, "You will never wash me." The implication in what he says is that serving is beneath a great man like Jesus. Jesus, though, knows that it is service, precisely that, which makes a person great. And so he tells Peter, and he tells us this morning, unless I wash you, unless, Peter, you understand that I've come to serve, and I call you to serve in the same way, then you have no part of me, no part of my ministry. And whom shall we serve? Shall we serve only those that we love? Should we serve only those that do everything perfect? Should we serve only those on our side of things? Only those who are just? Only those that are humble? That would be easy. But remember, basic training, it's hard. It's hard in the military. It's hard in our spiritual lives. Jesus says, no. We must follow his example, the way that he has served. And how has Jesus served? Jesus serves the egotistical and power-hungry Peter. He serves the wealthy and the powerful Pharisees like Joseph of Arimathea, like Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue when he heals his daughter. Jesus serves the unclean and the poor, the widows, the rejected, the lepers. Jesus serves the Roman soldier, who is part of an occupying, oppressive, foreign military power. And Jesus serves the one who betrays him, Judas. Jesus even serves Judas, whom he welcomes to his table, whom he kneels down before and washes his feet. Now that level of humble service is hard. That is difficult. It may even be harder than Marine basic training. I'm not sure. I haven't been through it. But I do know that it's hard to think like Jesus. It's hard to act like Jesus. It's hard to relate to others like Jesus. It's hard to love and serve like Jesus. Will we ever be able to do so? I don't know. But if we are ever to do so, this I know. First, we must learn to crawl before we can walk that walk. We can't get ahead of ourselves and try to change others and change the world before we are willing to get down on our hands and knees, to rewire our own brain and change ourselves. But if we are able and willing to do that, just like a toddler, it will, in fact, change us. It will rewire our brains and begin to change the way we think. It will allow us to see things that we never saw before. It will make us capable of doing things that we never thought that we could do. And share love with those we never thought we could. And when that happens, well, anything is possible. And when that happens, that will be the day when we at least have a chance, all of us, to get up off of our knees and dance in the joy of justice. May that day be today. Amen.